Crow, we are going to be exploring everything that has to do with this wonderful, wonderful system. I have with me Logan. Logan, please introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Logan Bose. I'm a freelance writer, editor, graphic designer, and a whole manner of other things from the Uppsala Nation. I've been working with Coyote and Crow for a little while now, and I will serve as your guide in this limited series into the world of Moccasin.
And I am Jade Valkyrie. I'm your resident newbie to Coyote and Crow, here to be that person that's like, what does that mean again? What is that? Could you please explain that? Or so, what do I do when? Yeah, that's me. I also do a lot of hosting, cosplaying, content creation, tabletop playing, and producing. I'm just really excited to be here. And I also do have Cherokee Nation heritage as well that I am in the process of reconnecting to. And so I think that this is a really great, opportunity and, kind of just great how everything flows together. And it's here for a reason. So I'm very, very excited about this series. But we are going to be exploring for this episode character creation, because how do you get into this world without an avatar for it? But before we do so, Logan, can you please describe the world that we will be getting ourselves into?
Sure, the world of Coyote and Crow is called Moccasin. It is a world of America or Turtle Island before the Columbian Exchange. It's a world where colonization of the indigenous peoples never happened. Another event happened instead, something called the Awis, long ago, but very, very different. And it kind of explores what would happen if the native people had been left alone.
That is a very, very awesome and hopeful future indeed. And also, don't want to forget to shout out Hero Forge for sponsoring the series, making the series possible, and allowing us to have this conversation and, just share with the rest of you all the amazing world of Coyote and Crow. But let's get started into that character creation. So I'll let you lead this, Logan.
Sure. So, when you make a character in Coyote and Crow, something important to note is that they are, by nature and definition, indigenous. And I've been asked before, oh, does this mean only indigenous people can play the game? No, of course not. But it's important to me. The entire system is important to me because I can remember growing up, I always had to add my own indigenous faces to the games I played, my own people, because I didn't really connect with most fantasy cultures. You had basically a couple of options in that regard. You had things like the orcs with their problematic aspects. You had all kinds of things that were really reductive and boiled cultures like that into a very caricaturized version of themselves. And I think it's really nice that there is a system that actually looks to the culture and expands upon it. And anyone can play Coyote and Crow. In fact, we invite and we hope people do join. And when you make a character, you are free to make someone who has a tribe or has a tribe that exists within the world of Coyote and Crow without necessarily being extant in our world. It's just what you feel most comfortable with. The only thing we ask is that anytime you do something with real indigenous people, you do it respectfully, ask questions, listen, that sort of thing. And it's a thing where we absolutely invite anyone and everyone to step into this world with us, because when we get to walk around in someone else's skin, even for a little while, even just at the gaming table, it is one of the most powerful tools of understanding we have at our disposal. But that's just my little intro for indigenous playing in a world where everyone's indigenous. Now, The actual mechanics of it are a little bit different. It's a little less crunchy. There's all kinds of statistics, things that people have going to be familiar with if you played with any tabletop RPG. But that comes a little later because the first thing we do, well, actually, Jade, when you make a character, what's the first thing you think of?
Ooh, I try to think of, I guess, their personality, if you will, or yeah, personality and like what they can do. I think that's the first thing that I do. In my opinion, other people start with a name, but I like to make my names meaningful, so I like to make sure that their names describe who they are as a person. So those are my two routes.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, that's what I do too. I start with the character before I start working on the numbers, as it were. And within Coyote and Crow, we start with the motivation. And this is exactly what it sounds like. It's a one-word description of the thing that drives your character forward, that makes them want to have more than an ordinary life. It's the thing that calls them to adventure, if you will. Uh, like some of the examples we have in the book, and it can be anything. It can be anything, but this is a relatively good spread. We've got curiosity, which is you just wanted to see what's out there. You want to know what's around the next horizon. You could have honor, and you are doing this for your family. You are doing this to gain a good name, not just for yourself, but those who have come before and after. And there's no strict mechanical benefit to motivation. The story guide, which is what the DM is called in Coyote and Crow, has the option to raise or lower your success numbers, make it harder or easier if you're going against your motivation. But that's not strictly necessary. It's not, it's an optional rule. But after, Jade, what's one of your favorite characters' motivations, would you say?
Oh, I think that I personally am a sucker for a good like redemption, like someone who feels like they need to do good in order to right a wrong.
Ooh, that is a good one. And that could fit under several, but the one I would put it under first would probably be validation.
Mm-hmm.
Because what is redemption but the urge to validate who you are as a person, where you've come, how you've become better, and how you're not like that anymore. But I love a good redemption arc myself too. Now, after we choose our characters' motivations, we go into what's called the archetypes. And the archetypes are sort of equivalent to your archetypes are kind of similar to your Dungeons and Dragons classes. You've got they rather than represent necessarily your role in combat or give you a package of abilities, they represent your role in society.
Mm-hmm.
Like the ones available are warrior, they're scout, tinkerer, we've got seekers, we've got healers, we've got scouts, and we've got whisperers. Each of these has a purpose in society. It's also kind of evocative of a mindset. Um, a warrior is not necessarily just a soldier, a guard, or like a wrestler. A warrior could just as easily be the sanitation worker who sees everything as a problem to attack. It's somebody who sees things very directly. It's someone who sees things and makes plans on how to win, basically. Warriors, because one thing the archetypes do give you mechanical benefits, very slight ones as far as such things go in Coyote and Crow.
Mm-hmm.
They give you a stat bonus, and a skill bonus. And with warrior, for instance, you get a +1 to strength, and you get a rank in unarmed combat or melee weapons,
Ooh.
which again does kind of point you towards, but it's not necessary. It's just kind of where the majority of these people end up, if that makes sense.
Like if you're in this way of thinking and if you're super duper straightforward, then perhaps you would be more akin to like using the strength or using the unarmed or yeah, that makes sense. Could you possibly explain what the whisperer one is as like a maybe a juxtaposition or just a different example of a archetype?
Sure. So the Whisperer deals a lot with communication. They tend to be your storytellers. They're also kind of your contraries. They're the ones who like to talk. They get a +1 to charisma, and they get a free rank in charm or performance, because these are your actors, these are your storytellers, your comedians. These are, and in the world of Coyote and Crow, all of these professions are very highly respected in society, because a comedian isn't just a person who tells jokes for a living. Yes, that's what they do, but they're also a form of healer. And in moccasing, a comedian, the very best comedians, perform in hospitals because they're a part of medicine. Now, we do this a little bit in our own world, but it's not crucial. It's an extra. It's something fun. But in the world of Coyote and Crow, that's an essential part of healing. And comedians can become very well-respected members of society. Um, do you have any questions about any of the others, Jade?
Hmm. Let's see. I'm trying to think for me and for chat if that makes sense. Or I'm just like, what seems amazing? I think that to just round us off for different types, I think that maybe let's talk about the scout. We'll see.
Sure. The Scout, they are kind of exactly what they sound like. They end up being the ones in front. They're the ones who are going to be right there. They're the ones who talk really fast and, all right, guys, let's go. If you've got a morning person, they're probably a scout, in addition to being the bane of everyone who's not. They're the ones who show up happy, peppy, and ready to go all the time. And oh my God, please calm down. They get a +1 to agility, and they get a free rank in stealth or ranged weapons, because they're the ones who are the bouncy, the happy people. They're the ones who tend to end up in very dexterous positions. Like, actually, you would end up with a lot of mechanics as scouts, because they're the ones who are going to be able to get into the engines on the Yutsu barges, and just anywhere where you want somebody who is adaptable, both mentally and physical, is a scout.
Awesome. And we do have the chat request where we're just going to go through all of them. So now I don't have to think for chat. We just get to go through every single one, and I'm entirely
Absolutely.
here for it. Oh, and
Absolutely.
also this is my co-host, my recurring co-host, Nemo. Everyone say hi to Nemo in the chat. He's also excited to learn about Coyote and Crow.
Aw. He's probably upset that there's not a Path of the Cat.
You know what? We'll just make you a different animal for a little bit. Is that okay? Yeah, he's fine with it. He's fine with it.
Aw. Well, cats are ever curious beasts. Now, we've got tinkerers, and tinkerers are your smarty pantses. They're the ones who are constantly looking for the ways to do new things. They're the ones who they end up being your engineers. They end up being your hacker types. They're the ones who want to figure out how things work. They also end up being mechanics, because they like taking things apart and figuring out how to put them back together. So they get a +1 to intelligence, and they get a free rank in a knowledge skill or a crafting skill because they're always working on something. Um, they also tend to be very, very. Um, they're the ones who you send out to find things if it's lost. Like,
Mm.
they're the ones who you can kind of trust to look at something from every angle. And um, yeah, then we come to our seekers. And the seeker is exactly what it says on the tin. They are they are your explorers, they're your investigators. They are the ones who want to know what's around the next corner. They get a +1 bonus to perception, and they get a free rank in investigation or tracking. Um, you might send a scout ahead into known territory, but for unknown, you're probably going to want to send a seeker first because they're going to move a lot more carefully. Um, and they're going to take the time to understand what they see and bring back accurate reports of a big picture rather than a narrow window, as it were. You can send the scout out for one thing and he'll come back and tell you all about it, but if you ask him about the things around it, oh, I'm sorry, I was focused on the thing. I didn't know I was supposed to pay attention to what was behind it. Can I go back? I'll go back right now.
I love that distinction. It's definitely of course we don't want to always compare things to Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, but for those that that might be the only thing that they have played before.
Of course.
It's very much something that is a lot different than other things like where you say, I guess, rangers and rogues, things of that nature. So having these two basically where their job is to traverse out, but they have different approaches to traverse out. And then all of these archetypes can be the one. It's just a matter of how they approach that. I really like that.
Exactly. It does end up being a mark of where they end up in society, but it's also a large part about how they see the world, how they think about things, and how they deal with new information. And they kind of form half of what D&D players recognize as classes. The other half we'll get to in just a minute. But first, we need to take a look at something crucial in every system, which is the healer. And the healers are, again, pretty self-explanatory. They're people who heal. They're not even necessarily all going to be like your magical healers, because Coyote and Crow does have supernatural abilities. But they are the ones who fix things. They're the ones who fix people, the ones who fix systems. They're the ones who will help not only your body, but your mind, your soul, and your family. Healers get a +1 to spirit during character creation, and a free rank in medicine or ceremony. Healers are honestly probably the most important. Like, I don't want to say most important, but at the same time, everyone needs healers. I'm personally of the big opinion that like everyone needs therapy, and healers would be your therapists, no questions asked.
Yes, 100%. I echoing that 100%. So they are very much a key point or a key part of society.
Now, with that, I think we have hit upon all of the archetypes available in Coyote and Crow, and each of them has a key role associated to it that you can see as you scroll through the book or you read through it. But I didn't hit a lot on them because that's just one aspect of them. That's just one aspect where they fit in society. And honestly, I want you to go and read for yourself, because as much as I love this world, I love sharing it with people. And the more people I have to share it with, the better. But you had a question about ceremony, right, Jade?
Yes. Yes, I did. I definitely did. I didn't want to disrupt the flow, but I was just like, a healing, but what is ceremony? Because that's a skill that I personally am not familiar with, and probably not many other people are. So what is a ceremony as a skill? What does it do?
So the ceremony is it is your knowledge and your feel for ceremonies. When I run Coyote and Crow, um, ceremony doesn't tend to come up a lot because in my nation, it's very kind of taboo to share native medicines and ceremonies. Um, Now, within the narrative, what that means for me is that yes, Lando, it can be like ritual casting. That is one option for it. But when I include it in the games, it's a very stripped down version. It's make your dice, and then I tell you you did the ceremony or you didn't do the ceremony well. Now, every player is free to come up with their own ceremony when they do it. And I love to encourage my players to tell the fabulous story about how they do their character's ceremony. And then if I leave it to the player to decide how involved in that they go, because more than a lot of other games I've seen, Coyote and Crow is a very narrative focused system. It's all about the story. There's absolutely crunch, there's absolutely stats, and there absolutely is combat. It's really dangerous, and it can end like that. When if I have to liken it to another system, I would actually liken combat in Coyote and Crow more to World of Darkness, like the old Vampire the Masquerade system, than to D&D 5e, because you can it's pretty common for you to roll enough successes to just end someone instantly, at least knock them unconscious. We'll get into things like that a little bit later in the series, but combat for now is enough to know that it's the quick and the dead. But ceremony, part of it is ritual casting, part of it is uh, spiritual ceremonies, like ceremonies for cleansing, ceremonies for greeting a new day. It's ceremonies for life. Doing a tobacco ritual in the morning would be a ceremony roll, and a story guide might give you, a benefit or a lower success number, which makes it easier later in the game for doing your morning ceremony. Contrary-wise, they might hit you harder for not doing the ceremony, because when you think about it, ceremony is an incredibly important thing in society. We all have little rituals we do. We all have ceremonies to celebrate big things in life. We've got weddings, we've got funerals, in various societies, we've got christenings, baptisms, we've got powwows, using that word in its actual context. We all have ceremonies, even if it's as simple as having a morning cup of coffee. And think about how your life can get thrown off kilter by missing it. Like, I know when I don't have that morning hot cup of coffee, I am stumbling and I'm thinking about it for hours. It takes me so long to get back on track in the day. And that's one of the things this skill represents.
I love that has definitely different interpretations and meanings to the word ceremony. So, like you mentioned, like if you were to be having a character from from a real life tribe, then you don't necessarily have to use it in that context. So you can definitely translate it into different ways. And I'm fangirling already. How many minutes are we into this stream? Like 38. I'm fangirling like 5 times already. So if that doesn't tell you, you should definitely give this system a go. But I will leave it up to you, Logan. We have 2 paths that we can go forward now. Choose your own explanation adventure, or do we want to talk about the paths, or would we like to talk about the different stats? Because I know that Lando had a question about the spirit stat, but I'm not sure if that would be great to explain before or after the paths that we could take in our
So
character creation.
with we're gonna hit stats in a little bit because I do want to talk about the paths. But first, I want to, because something I didn't go into earlier is that I want to hit again a little harder is this is this is a game about indigenous cultures, but it's not necessarily as we know them. They definitely resemble it, but this is a world vastly different from ours. So any if you want to take cues from a real life indigenous culture or yours, you can add as much or as little and it's still in game. It's still perfectly in keeping with the spirit of the game because it's a different world. It's a different setting. It's a different history. And we just we get to play with it. We get to enjoy it. And yeah. But with that, I will go ahead and step into paths. And I'm going with paths because they are sort of the other half of classes for this system. Um, and if you're following along with me, that's page 132 in the book. So paths are they are that set of they are closer to that set of skills and abilities that D&D players are so familiar with in classes. A path gives you your powers. They give you your Adonity gifts. They give you access to some of your supernatural abilities. Now, as far as skills go, you're allowed to build upon skills based not only on your archetype, but so many things that you essentially have free reign over which skills to pick. But with paths, so the paths are related to the Adonity. And the Adonity is a rite of passage. It's also the name for the spiritual energy that flows through the people of Moccasin in this world. When you go through your Adonity, about 1 in 10 people manifests a power. Actually, I'm skipping ahead. So when you go through your Adonity, it's a rite of passage. It's got a spiritual element, it's got a technological element, and it's got a bit of what we would think of as a magical element. You choose or are chosen by an animal. Personally, spirit animal has become so appropriated that it kind of makes me cringe to hear it, but that really is what happens here. You get adopted by a spirit animal, basically, and you've got I don't know, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 15. You've got basically 15 options to choose from. Each one gives you related stats, and the related stats isn't a bonus. The related stats goes into the powers you get to pick from later. Like if you pick Path of the Bison, you get to choose a power from endurance, or no, from strength or will. And or if you picked Falcon, it's perception or spirit. Yes, spider is another option. It's actually probably my favorite. Um, and that one would give you the option of perception or strength. And we're going to get into the powers in a little bit. But
Cool.
yes.
So I always love to be the person that chooses weird combinations. So in this character creation, because I do have a little sheet that I'm making like a little mini character during the stream. Who knows if I'll use it for later or not. But so let's say that I wanted to, like we said before, have this character where their motivation is validation. And maybe my archetype was like the Whisperer. But then I chose the path of the bison. Would that be something that would make my character harder to play? Is that something that would be perfectly valid? What are your opinions on that?
So I don't believe in harder to play in Coyote and Crow. Not really. Not the way the game is set up, not the way it's balanced. All of these are just as viable as another. Now, when it comes to the interplay between paths and archetype, there's some obvious overlap. You could be just picking a random combination, for instance. You could be a Path of Bear warrior and this absolute unit of a man, just huge and furry and carrying an axe, and maybe you've got this really strange accent and you speak in a very gruff voice. But you could be just as viable having that Whisperer with the Path of the Bison. And the validation, because validation works for almost anyone, honestly. Everyone, we've all got a chance, we've all got that desire to prove ourselves one way or another, where it's romantically, whether it's in something new, whether it's just in life in general. And Coyote and Crow is not a perfect world in that while it to me is a very hopeful setting, it's definitely got its problems. There are still cliques. There are still old tribal grudges that exist in the world. You don't run into that as much in Cahokia, which is typically the focus of the material released so far, because it's the hub. It's kind of the dream city. It is Coyote and Crowtopia, as it were. And we're definitely, the setting is ever expanding at the moment. I happen to know that there are some exciting things in the works for later on. But for now, we're focusing on Cahokia. But even in Cahokia, the warrior societies would be happy to welcome a Path of the Bison, but they might be less willing to welcome a Path of the Bison Whisperer. Oh yeah, you tell stories. What are you going to do when we're in the fight? You're going to talk the other guy to death? Ha 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 ha. Which would generate the need for validation. Or it could be that you are a whisperer and you feel like a whisperer, but the bison chose you and you want to prove yourself to bison. You want to prove that bison did not make a mistake in choosing you. Because once you are on a path, you can't change it. Like, you can't later decide, oh, I'm going to become a Path of the Snake because I like snake better. No. You live and you die on your path.
You heard it here, folks. You cannot multi-path. Okay, sorry. I had to put that joke in a little bit.
Oh no, by all means. Now, the path is more than psychological, because this is the reason why you can't multipath. It's also got a little bit of a change on your physiology. You don't like get stronger, you don't necessarily get taller, but when you go through your Adonity, there is a definite change to your DNA. There is, it's different for everyone, but there is definitely a marked change in your physiology, is what I'm gonna say right now, and leave it at that. And when you choose your path, it does also give you a bonus to those two stats I told you earlier. Like, Path of the Eagle would get a bonus to strength and wisdom because eagles fly high. After all, don't most of us live in Eagle Land? Flat stare. But after that, we come to the next part of character creation. Now, this part I personally kind of like to just vaguely hit at this point and then come back to at the end. Like, I've got and I have my reasons for doing that because I tend to develop the character as I go along. I don't usually have a character spring full and whole into being in my head. It is a development process that I walk along. Um, and I like to put down, because what happens next is we decide on gifts and burdens, our stats, and our skills and skill ranks. Gifts and burdens are very much like merits and flaws from the World of Darkness system. They're things that help or hurt your character. Um, like if you've got an addiction to a substance, that's a burden, and it can be a rank 1, 2, or 3, and that would give you 1, 2, or 3 points for later in character creation. Meanwhile, if you had, say, a loving family, which again, all of these are between ranks 1 and 3, just for how much they impact your life. A 3-point family gift would be a big, loving, supportive family. They are, always there. They're always in your corner. They're always telling you, yes, we love you. Yes, you can do it. They're always there for you, and they can help you with a place to stay. If you need some money, they can help you with that. If you're in trouble, maybe you can call them and your cousin can show up to give you a ride or, back you up in a tough situation. Meanwhile, if you've got, say, a three rank gift or a 3-rank burden family, that could mean that you are the sole provider for a large family. I hate to think of family as a burden, but at the same time, I think a lot of us have those relatives who only show up when they want something, or they're not the best or most supportive. Um, Especially millennials. A lot of times we've got this, call it a weird relationship with our parents where it's not a good thing. Um, a rank 1 burden family could just be, within the world of Coyote and Crow, a rank 1 family burden could just be you don't have a family, because the family is such an important aspect to life in this setting that not having it can hang on you, it can drag on you. There are places in the city for people who don't have families. There are, similar to apartment buildings, community lodges, where single people or people who don't have family of any kind tend to end up just so they can come together with each other and form a found family.
So would you
But
say
that,
that communities in this world of Coyote and Crow are like a very core, like very, very important in this setting?
oh, absolutely, 100%. Community is almost everything. Maybe that's going a little too hard, but it is a large part of the setting. Restaurants exist, but they tend to be places where families come together to eat. I was running a game not too long ago describing one because in Cahokia, restaurants definitely exist, but they tend to have these big communal conversation pit type things where people can come and they sit with their family and they share a meal and they talk and they laugh, and it's a bonding experience, because even that is considered to be part of the healing process. But yeah, community is definitely incredibly important.
Mhm. Yes, I definitely agreeing with Lando and chat. It's a super cool mechanic that forces more complete backstories and also helps inform roleplay. This is a narrative, a very narrative focused game, like you mentioned. So having these, these burdens, these gifts, now it's really just fleshing out the character and how they
Mhm.
live in this world and perhaps live in Cahokia.
Absolutely. And to sum up, gifts and burdens just tend to be minor mechanical ways or major mechanical ways that backstory can come into play from time to time. It gives the player something to tie into and gives the story guide something to play with. Oh, I see you've got a rank 2 family burden. Well, it's the middle of the adventure, and guess who's calling? Your sister's in a jam, and she needs you to come pick her up right now.
I
Uh,
love that.
yes. And there's a couple that can only be gifts and a couple that can only be burdens. Um, like, it's really hard to call notoriety a gift most of the time. But, yeah.
Mhm.
However, if there are no other questions about gifts and burdens, we can move on to stats.
I do have one question about gifts and burdens, and that's it. Are there? I'm looking, of course, along with the chat at the what's in the book, but are there more specific examples about, say, like examples of like the levels of burdens, or is that up to the storyteller or story guide? Is that correct? Story guide for this game?
So there's 1 to 3 ranks. I suppose there's 3 ranks: rank 1, rank 2, and rank 3. And it's how much it affects it. Rank 1 comes into play very rarely. Rank 1 affects everyday life, and rank 2 is between. And how much something is worth tends to be a matter of negotiation between the story guide and the player.
Mhm.
They do have a couple of examples listed, but it's not so much about the mechanics as it is about tying story into crunch. So the individual levels matter less than the overall effect they have on the game itself. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Yes.
Excellent. But so let's say you're going through character creation and you've hit gifts and burdens. You decide on, okay, I've got uh, 5 points and I want 2 rank 1 gifts and 1 rank 3 burden. How that works is that you spend 2 points, so it goes down to 3, and then you get 3 back, so you end up with 6. And that is really cool because gifts and burdens is the point where you kind of roll on. Um, because after you move on with that step, any unspent points get dropped down to be used in stats.
Hmm.
So in my previous example, rather than having the base 42 points for stats, you would then have 48 to spend. So if you choose only burdens, you can bump your stats up more than you could otherwise, but any story guide worth of salt is going to make you pay for that.
Gonna be using those burdens frequently. Not necessarily to punish, but just to keep things, interesting. Unless, of course, everyone wants to, and someone wanted to play like, a very, very much power fantasy thing.
Yeah.
But what's a good story if there's not like a little bit of struggle?
Mm-hmm. And well, there's nothing inherently wrong with playing out a power fantasy. It's appealing to all
Oh
of
yeah,
us.
definitely.
I know that I've definitely made min-maxed characters. I know, but even in Coyote and Crow, min-maxing is definitely possible, but smart play is much more important than stats. And I think that's true of any dice pool system. Um, because you're like a companion gift. A rank 3 companion is invaluable. With a rank 3 companion and some smart play, you could take down any path of the bear warrior. Because, okay, my rank 3 companion is going to circle behind him and throw a net over him, and I'm going to beat him with a club. Not that I know any big bear warriors that any of my characters currently want to beat with a club, but, you know, just as a random example.
If the opportunity arises, just in case, you know you have a homie, a level 3 homie with you.
Exactly.
That always has your back. That's honestly, anything in life would be great with a level 3 homie. So
It is. Your level 3 homies are your ride or dies. I'm really going to have to resist saying rank 3 homie from now on.
I'm so sorry.
But that's okay. We're going to go ahead and move into stats, unless anyone has more questions about gifts and burdens.
I personally don't have any, but if you have any questions, including about this, please let us know in the chat so then we can know and see, because we are very much responsive to all of your questions, because we're here to learn and here to, just discuss this amazing game. So yeah, but I think that we could move on, and of course, if not, we can always circle back.
Exactly. I do have a tendency to waffle on. Jade has full reign to vocally kick my ass to get me back on track.
Respectfully, though.
Respectfully. Anyway, so the stats, like I said, after you're done with your gifts and burdens, you drop whatever's left into your stat pile. So it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. Like, you don't spend 5 points and get a stat 5. And it is, again, a 1-to-5 system in each of your 9 stats. Now, yes. No, to get your initial stats, you spend 3 points. You automatically have a 1 in everything to start with. Now, to get higher, you have to spend 3 points for a 2, 6 points for a 3. There's a nifty little chart. I'm just reading it off. 10 points for a 4, and 15 for a rank 5. Now, working with 42 points or even 48, that's not a lot. So you've really got to decide what you want your character to be good at, what you want them to be okay at, and what they're gonna suck at. Because it's really hard to make a character who is good at absolutely everything. Very few people in life are true generalists. Very few people in life are true prodigies and savants. So it makes sense that our characters wouldn't be either. Now, a lot of these, if you've played any tabletop role-playing games, you're going to recognize. There's strength, there's agility, might as well call it dex, endurance, definitely constitution, intelligence, exactly what you think it is. Now, perception is where we get into a little bit different. So perception is exactly what it sounds like. A perception is how well you hear, see, and also kind of how quickly you can interpret and process that data. Wisdom is, again, it's very like D&D. It's very like the wisdom you see there. Whereas intelligence is your critical thinking ability, it's your ability to synthesize and process information. Wisdom is how careful you are. Wisdom is how Wisdom is how well you can remember things, how easily you can order knowledge and recall it at a moment's notice. It's how many times you can make the same mistake without learning your lesson, among other things. So I've got very low wisdom personally. But after that, we come into where we really start getting a little bit off from the Dungeons and Dragons. Int and perception, how are they different? Intelligence deals more with raw data. It's intelligence is where you do math. Intelligence is your ability to kind of think on your feet, whereas perception is how quickly and easily you see and hear the things around you. It's the difference between being able to very quickly come up with a plan. A person with high intelligence and low perception is going to come up with a plan first and then look around and go, oh shit, my plan to jump from wall to wall isn't going to work because I'm on an open plane. Fuck. I'm going to have to come up with a new plan. Whereas the high perception, low intelligence person is going to look around and go, this is a very beautiful field. It's got lots of flowers. It's got lots of, dips that I should probably be careful of. And oh, that's a claw coming at my face. I should probably do something about that.
That was a good question.
So, spirit, however, it's a little more like what people think charisma is in other systems. So spirit and charisma work kind of hand in hand here, but charisma is how likable you are, but spirit is your natural force of presence. It's how easily you can feel a room. Personally, I would have a higher than average spirit because when I walk in, I've got a very large presence and I'm going to take up space and I'm going to make you hear my voice. Because I naturally have that sense of presence. I naturally have that difficult to ignore me. And charisma is more your ability to channel that. It's your ability to focus that where you want it to go. Your high spirit, low charisma person is that impossible to ignore person in the corner of the room who doesn't say a whole lot. Whereas a low spirit, high charisma person is very likable, talks very fast, is very good at what they do, but they're just not memorable. You can't think of their name. They're the actors who, they were in that one thing and it was so good, and that line, I can repeat that line over and over in my head, but I just can't think of their character's name. I can't think of their name. That's kind of the difference between spirit and charisma. Which will leave us with one more stat, which is will. And will is your determination. Will is your ability to keep going. Will is your mental fortitude. Will is your grit. Will is the ability to keep on trucking when life kicks you over and spits in your eye. And all of these, so as was up on the screen a few minutes ago, all of these are organized not just into physical, spiritual, and mental, but each of them also correlates to basically attack, defense, and yes, thank you, power, finesse, and reserve, which is not all the combat in Coyote and Crow is physical. Not all the damage is physical. When we get a little further in, we're going to hit your mental defenses and your spiritual defenses and your physical defenses, and you can definitely take physical, mental, and spiritual damage from all of these. Um, Now, that's just a little bit about why these are ordered the way they are. When we're talking about the different kinds of damage, um, so let's say you make a particularly cutting, yes, emotional damage does happen in this game. It would be a particular cutting remark could do mental damage. In at least one scenario, there is in at least one module, there is a situation where you're in a virtual space, and the damage you take physically when you come out of that virtual space translates to either mental damage or spiritual damage, based on the characters involved. If they take it as a blow to their ego, then it's going to be mental damage. Whereas if they take it as a blow to their, um, actually, I suppose it would be the other way around. Spiritual would be a blow to their ego, and mental is just the emotional wear from being in that virtual space and getting hit with an axe and feeling it. So it gives the ST, the story guide, a lot of. You were, say, making a particularly cutting remark at somebody, if you were trying to do damage mentally with either a power or what have you, it would be strength for physical, intelligence for mental, and spirit for spiritual. Likewise, if you're trying to avoid these, it would be agility for physical, perception for mental, and charisma for spiritual. And if you can't avoid it, your ability to just take it and deal with it is represented by your endurance, your wisdom, and your will, respectively. And that's kind of how stats work in this game. So, are there any more questions about stat? Yes, you can die from each. You can die from each. So the way this game works is, each of those reserves is its own separate damage pool. And if any of them drop to their negative inverse, then you die. If you've got a 3 in endurance, and you drop to -3 physically, then you die. Because if you hit 0, you end up unconscious, equivalent to okay. No, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So later on, we're going to hit what's called derived stats. And that's going to include physical defense, body, mind, mental defense, spiritual defense, and soul. Each of these comes with a life total. The body, mind, and soul are your life totals. That's what I was talking about a minute ago. And yes, Padme died from emotional damage.
It's possible.
Yes, that would be a blow probably to her spirits, so her soul. Because if you've got a body of 9 and you drop to -9, which is a really high body, then you're dead. If you drop to 0 body, you're unconscious. It means that you are, or immobilized. It means that you are out of the fight and you can't do anything else because your body is broken, bruised, and battered to the point that you really can't move anymore. Your mind is your mental life total. And just like body, you drop to 0 on that, you are utterly destroyed. Mental, I would probably, yes, they go into your endurance, your wisdom, and your will are part of what then go into forming your body, mind, and soul later. But I don't want to get too far into that just now because we're going to have to hit up how to get derived stats first before we start talking about them. And they come a little later in the process. But right now, it's enough to know that yes, you can die from each.
And that's why they all matter. So make sure you're doing your character creation. In case you're min-maxing, be mindful.
Oh yes.
Or
Well,
soulful or bodyful.
so I've heard it said that there's no better stat than Dex in 5e, and you're free to agree or disagree with that. Or I've also heard said Constitution is the best. Personally, I don't know. But in Coyote and Crow, they all matter. No matter what you do, unless you just put 3s across the board, and I haven't done the math to see if that's even possible, you're going to end up with a weak stat. You're going to end up with a weakness. It's just how it's going to work. So yeah, be mindful. Maybe don't put your Path of the Bear warrior with his really low mental stats up against somebody who's very effective at capitalizing on low mental defenses. But in this character creation process, we move on to skills. And just like above, if we have any points left over that we don't spend in our stats, we can drop those right down into our skills. And skills these points never move up. They do move down, but they never move up. You can't take points from skills and put them into stats, nor can you put them into gifts and burdens, but you can go the opposite direction with it. Now, Coyote and Crow, there's a lot of skills. These are very similar to what they do in 5e. They are how well you know how to do something. They represent what your characters spent their life learning how to do. You've got options for art, athletics, ceremony, charm. I'm not going to read the entire list. But however, if any of these aren't particularly self-explanatory, I will go a little further into it if there are any questions either from you, Jade, or from chat, just while we've got the list of skills up on the board there.
Personally, I don't have any other questions about these skills per se, but I do think that it's great, a great segue into something that I don't think we touched on before, which is just how futuristic would you say that this world for Coyote and Crow is? Because we do have these skills like computers, cybernetics, science, all of these different, you would see them in a very, very traditional sci-fi setting. So how would you describe the futuristic and scientific nature of the world of Coyote and Crow?
So Coyote and Crow has been described as an indigenous version of Afrofuturism. And I am far from the expert on that. But to me, it seems a very apt descriptor. It's very futuristic. That's why I say it is such a hopeful setting, because in the world of moccasing, we don't use fossil fuel vehicles. We don't use things like that. Most of the vehicles are powered off of magnets. A lot of technology is based on magnets. Like, while native characters here still use bows and arrows, even on the cover art, we see that it's not necessarily traditional bows and arrows. Solar punk, yes, that's a good way to call it. Solar punk, magnet punk, indigipunk. But as you can see, the lovely woman on the cover here is using what's called a mag bow. It's a bow that's held together by magnets. The arrow is fired using magnets. We have things in this setting called mag launchers, which are basically like guns, but rather than combustible powder, they use the power of magnets to sling things forward. We still use very old school weapons like war clubs. We still use very things like axes and knives. But like one of the options that you can have on your weapons are Anicha blades, which if you've ever played Star Wars, they're very like vibro blades. They are weapons that vibrate at a very high frequency and cut through individual things. Um, they are so effective at cutting that they actually need special electromagnetic sheaths to hold them in place. Um, Now, there's not a lot of artwork for it, but it's described pretty heavily that your average knife for an Anicha blade, like if you've got a pocket knife sized Anicha blade, you would need something about this big to keep it in check. It's these bulky, unwieldy things because it is such a dangerous weapon that it's going to cut through without technological assistance. So something else that I am going to touch on is that beyond the skills you see here, Coyote and Crow has, because these are general skills, beyond that, you've also got your specialized skills. And specialized skills are exactly what they sound like. They go under your individual skills. They're bought separately. They are bought at a different cost. And the chart for this is on page 148. And this specialized skills would be the difference between melee weapons and war clubs. It represents specialized training, whereas you could definitely pay 10 points and get skill rank 4 in melee weapons and pick up almost anything and have the same ability to use it, like your knives, your clubs, your axes. You could pay a much cheaper price and be just as good with an axe and only an axe. And also, if you've got specialized skills, the story guide is encouraged to make certain rolls easier when dealing with that weapon. Not just the weapon, but that specialized skill. Not only would it be easier to use the axe, for instance, but you just might get a bonus on your defense against axes because you are so familiar with them. You know how long it's going to take to swing that axe. You know how long you have to get the hell out of the way. It's very similar to piloting and cybernetics and all of those things. And actually, yes, husbandry is on here. Yes, you could have an unarmed skill, and you can have both. You can have a skill rank 2 in now the difference is you can't go above your rank in general with you can't go above your rank in general with your specialized. But I did see that we have a oh yes, it is possible to have a specialization in fist punching rather than unarmed. Now, I did see we had talk about cybernetics and piloting, and yes, Coyote and Crow does feature options for cybernetics because this is a very science fiction-y world. The technology level is kind of equivalent to, call it, Blade Runner, I suppose. I hesitate to use that, but there's not really a more tonally appropriate one. But it's we definitely still have problems in the world, but we also have a lot less suffering because the technology exists. And in this particular world, it's not gate kept behind whether or not you can pay for it normally. Normally. As Connor himself has put it, no one in Cahokia would go hungry.
So would you say that these like specialized skill, and this is a little bit off topic, so just heads up. Would you say that these specialized skills are kind of like feats, but not necessarily in the same way of D&D feats where like you get these bonuses, but something that, you know, adds extra flavor to a skill that you already have?
Oh, absolutely. Um, they are definitely expansions upon skills you already have. Something else to note is the way dice rolls work in this system. When you make a skill check, typically the way you do it is, let's say, is when you make a skill, so long as you have at least one rank in it, you get to choose between the two related stats to build your dice pool. So if you're going to make an athletics roll and you've got 2 in that and 3 in strength, but only a 2 in endurance, then you could choose to use strength and have a dice pool of 5. However, if you don't have any ranks in athletics and you're trying to roll it, then you have to use the lower dice pool. So if that same character had no ranks in athletics, the only roll he could make for it would be those 2 dice in endurance, making it much more difficult. So something else to keep in mind when building your characters. This is a very flexible, permeable system. You can build almost any character you want within reason. And all you've got to do is keep an eye on what you want to hit strongly and what you want your weaknesses to be.
So does that lead us into these derived stats?
Not quite yet. Actually, I am going to skip ahead and get us to the derived stats because I want to talk about that before we get
curious.
too far afield. I am actually going to... Yes. So give me just a minute to get there.
No, if we need to go over the other things, because I'm sure there's lots of important stuff. My own brain curiosity was just like, I want to know what these boxes are. By the way, for those that are following along and trying to create for the first time in Coyote and Crow, there are resources on the Coyote and Crow website where you can even just find a fillable form, a PDF, to just get you started then and there. And it's very straightforward. I'm doing it right now as the resident newbie, so it's pretty cool. Let's see if we can get that link in chat, therefore we can see people if they would like to join out. Yeah. Hopefully I can post links in this chat. We'll see in a little bit. There we go.
So...
Cool.
So, Lando, to answer your question, this world does have traditional infrastructure as we think of it. The main city is Cahokia, which did have a real world equivalent. Because I'm going to hit this here since this came up, that I have throughout my life heard that, natives were nothing but nomads, natives never had agriculture, natives had no cities, and this is all completely untrue. It's a thing that media glommed onto a very long time ago when natives were considered an enemy of America. The burgeoning country still had sections of the world where they had these people that made things really inconvenient for them. And I'm not going to get too far into this because I'm going to get really heated. But The short answer is that there are definitely cities in Coyote and Crow. There are small villages. Some people do still live nomadic. And just to sort of double back to the point for real life, many native tribes did have cities. We would have more ruins, but a lot of them have mysteriously disappeared, been pulled down, been used for other things, built over, literally erased. I mean, Coyote and Crow. So to get back to derived stats, we end up now looking at. So derived stats are exactly what they sound like. They are stats you get from adding other stats together. Now, Jade, you've been following along with building your own character, right?
Yes.
So you have you've got all your stats filled out, right?
The numbers have eluded me. So but the archetypes are not eluded me. But I am willing to just plug in some suggested numbers in the meantime.
Okay. You know what? Go through and plug in numbers between 1 to 5. We're not going to worry too much about whether they fall in line. Just make, what looks like a decent, well-rounded character in the next 2 minutes as I waffle on.
Yes. So what I am doing mentally is that I am making a whisperer with the path of the raccoon, because I do love me some people who like to talk, some people who like to make people feel better, usually of the mind and soul variety. So definitely in the wheelhouse of my preferred types of things to do. So
well, that explains why we're friends.
Yeah. So yeah, she's definitely going to be one of those people that has the spirit and the charisma. But if you ask her to punch something, I don't know about that one, mate. That might be not something that would happen really well. But that willpower is definitely there. So I have my stats. Now, how
Excellent.
do we go from there?
So, like with initiative, most derived stats are just based off a simple formula, and Lando has been very kind and pulled it up for us. I did not even have to give him a page number because he is so on top of it. So your initiative score is made by adding your agility, your perception, and charisma. And agility works like it does between initiative is initiative. It's exactly what it is everywhere else that has initiative. It's who goes first in combat. Initiative is a topic we're going to be talking a lot more about in later episodes, though. So for now, it has a base number that goes up or down based on various things that happen in combat, because narrative is very important in Coyote and Crow. Now, so Jade, what is your initiative?
My initiative is to double down, initiative is my agility score, or is it all of the three of the middle column?
It's agility, perception, and charisma.
All right. In that case, my agility is I can do math, or my initiative is 10. It'd be really bad if I said my agility was 10 and you're like, what is going on? The most agile individual. No, my initiative is 10.
And you're absolutely right. It is all that middle common. It is all that middle column. For that matter, most of these can refer back to that individual chart we looked at earlier. I'm not asking Lando to go back. It exists because if your physical defense is made up of your agility and your endurance, your mental defense is made up of your perception and wisdom, and your charisma and will make up your mystical defense. What these mean is that instead of having for combat, ease of combat, instead of having separate things for instead of making two rolls, one to get out of the way and one to take the blow, you've got your two stats which then add together and represent your full ability to get out of the way and take the blow. So that's why we have these particular stats where they are. And that goes for all of them across the board. Your physicals, your mentals, and your mysticals. Jade, what is your character's physical, mental, and mystical defenses?
So for their physical defense, they have a 5. For their mental defense, they have a 6. And for their the last one, their mystical, I believe, then they have a 9. I'm not sure if I said mystical twice.
It's okay.
Mental and mystical. There we go. The yellow column, as it is on the fillable form, is 9.
Now, your derived stats, your body, mind, and soul are these life gauges that I was talking about earlier. So body is exactly what it sounds like. It is your body. It is your hit points, to refer back to D&D. Your body is made up of all of your physical stats added together, your strength, agility, and endurance. Jade, what are we looking at for you?
Okay, so that is the combined of all 3 of those. So that is a 7 in total, for the body total. And let's say that like I'm in this game right now. So then currently I also have 7.
So, that's actually pretty average. Not too bad. You're not too, skinny, not too frail, anything like that. So if you get hit with an axe and you drop that body to 0, you go unconscious. You're either bleeding out or you're otherwise out of the fight. But if your body falls to the negative of your endurance and just your endurance, then you die. So, what's your endurance, Jade?
It's a 2. So if I took 9 body damage, then bye-bye. That's where it comes in. Because I was like, average? That sounds pretty generous, all things considered. And then, yeah, that endurance flips that. That's what it is.
Yep.
Whew. So, min-maxers out there, don't negate endurance in case you are going to be, or like we said earlier, don't negate any of the reserve stats, if you will, because they do matter.
All of your
indeed.
stats matter. That's why I look forward to seeing what min-maxers do with this game, because it's kind of hard to break. No matter what you do, you're going to end up with a weakness, even if your weakness is everything's the same level. Now, the mind is very similar. It's just all of your mental stats added together make your mind. And if your mind has 2 functions beyond just being your hit points. Mind is your mental hit points. Mind is also a pool you can draw from with a mechanic called focus that we're going to hit later. You can use it to make things easier. You can use it to help with things you do. But mind is your mental fortitude. It is the strength of your mental defenses, just for ease of saying. So if you hit 0 on your mind, you fall unconscious. And if you hit your negative to wisdom, you die. Now, with mental, you still die, but it's a different kind of death. This is going catatonic. This is or you go insane. I saw that in at least one game I played. Very familiar to Cthulhu players.
So is this since you mentioned that, or maybe I should say this for combat, or how to play your character once you've made it. But it's good, interesting to know. So this is something that you could die from as well, but you can also choose to spend these points.
Yep.
So in the case that you do have, let's say, I don't know, like one mind point left, and then you chose to do one final act, then that almost could potentially get you towards unalive, but mind form.
And I know that myself, I would absolutely let you spend that last mind point for one last act of heroism. Now, the problem is that's a little bit tricky because your last mind point should really be after you fall unconscious. So if you are a gibbering mess because you have no more mind left, it's really hard to justify the ability that you can spend that last mind point. But a good enough story makes everything possible.
That's what it's all about.
And this is, first and foremost, a storytelling game. So, Soul is exactly like both of these. Yes, brain dead, vegetative state. I didn't say brain dead because that's really more where I see, well, yeah, I suppose that is an option. Soul is all of your spiritual characteristics combined together. Exact same as the other two. If you drop to 0, you fall unconscious. Your soul leaves the body. Your soul is very fragile. Or I also tie soul more to emotions than I do mental. That's up to my interpretation, but it is how I, as a story guide, choose to interpret it. So with soul, if you fall to your negative will, you die. And that is very much that you're alive. You're it's ego death. You're alive, you're breathing, your body still functions, everything's the way it should be, but you're gone. You're not here. You are a husk, essentially. And that brings us to the end of the derived stats. Does anyone have any questions?
Now, are there ways to use the soul points like you could use the mind points in the game?
Not currently. Wait, yes, I take that back. There is fortitude, which, again, we're gonna hit later. We're gonna hit that probably when we talk more about combat. So look forward to that.
And I just realized when I'm just so, once again fangirling, but with that, when you're doing this fillable form and you fill out your stats, wow, all the skills are right there. They're now in there for you. At least the numbers for the rank systems, like we mentioned. Not the specialized skills, those. But the other ones, they're there. At least for right now. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty neat.
Excellent. I'm glad you're fangirling so hard. I love this system so much.
So now that we have our archetypes, we have our path, we have our motivation, we have our stats, our derived stats, our skills, our gifts, our burdens. What is next on our agenda for creating a character?
So next on our agenda is abilities. And abilities are those powers that we've been kind of talking very obliquely about. So we're looking at page 171, and you should be able to just click on it, the number, because I love that about this system. This book.
You love to see it.
I love good editing. I know we've all played role-playing games where the edit is and yes, Lando, exactly like losing the will to live. That's exactly what it is. So we've all played games where the editing is just garbage. But still. So the thing of it is, when you go through your Donity, your body's changed, You have purple lines that start glowing all throughout your body. Um, one in about 5 or 10 gets an ability, and it's assumed just right out that all characters are one of these people. You are one of the special chosen ones who has abilities. And we've got descriptions of all of them. Now, you get to choose one automatically. And to my current knowledge, there's not a way to start with a second. There's no gift, no burden you can take, no thing that lets you have a second ability at character creation. You can learn more through the game, but that's left up to the storyteller, the story guide about how you earn it. There's no, well, we'll get into long and short term goals in a minute. So you get to pick one based on your path. And way back in the path section, I'm not asking Lando to switch back for us, but way back when you picked your path, each of them had related stats. Like for Bison, we had strength and will. And as you can see from page 172 here, one more page on, Lando. Okay. Each of these abilities are, yes, thank you. Each of these abilities are arranged according to your stats. And you get to pick one power from any of the related stats to your path. Like Bison had strength and will, so you could pick power of the bear, skin of the armadillo, warrior's fire, Wolverine's resolve, spirit's covenant, or owl's watch. And these are all kinds of useful. They have direct attack powers. They have things that bump stats. They have things that let you do weird things with the spirit world. There's a lot of powers that the individual powers might be able enough to form their own episode. So I'm not going to spend too much time on them unless someone has specific questions.
I do know that we are running a little bit low on time, so just being mindful of that. But for example, for people following, I guess my character creation as a raccoon, I believe I had charisma as one of my things. So that would mean that I could choose between like this mountain's inspiration, Coyote's gaze, or the deer's smile, and that would be something that I would start out with. Correct?
Yep. That is exactly right.
Cool. And I remember that there were 2 columns that had the first primary skill that they were associated with, and then their secondary. Does it matter which one you choose from?
Nope.
Or okay.
You can take from either, and it's not a primary, secondary. They are just the related stats.
Mm-hmm. They're just in 2 different columns, so you have 2 related ones. Good to know.
For Path of the Raccoon, for instance, charisma and intelligence. Neither is more, neither is less. They are equally as important. So, with that done, that actually brings us kind of to the end of the crunch of making a character. It's, as my old DM would say, so much for the easy part. Because at this point, we are done with filling out numbers. Well, I mean, with the exception of equipment, but that is so individualized to a character. Well, I suppose I could talk about wealth.
Would wealth be could wealth be a gift or a burden?
Yes, you can. So everyone has a starting wealth, and I want to say it's starting wealth of 3. And if you choose the wealth gift, that ups your wealth. Oh, I was wrong. Starting wealth of 4 as default. Now, as you you could take the wealth gift and get 1 to 3 more ranks, so wealth 7 to start, or you could take it as a burden and have wealth rank 1. And the way equipment works is everything has an associated wealth score, and that's just how expensive it is, because Coyote and Crow doesn't want to focus too much on individual Neasy and how much something costs. Can you afford it? Yes or no? There's a quick answer. And if you can kind of afford it, it drops your wealth, and if you can't, it doesn't, that kind of thing. However, everyone starts with 3 items equal to your wealth rank and 1 item equal to your wealth rank plus 1. Just based on what you and the story guide decide is appropriate for the chronicle or the story. Now, what we have left in character creation is your backgrounds, your initial goals, and background, it's just your backstory. Just backstory. I love backstory. I love writing pages and pages. I have one ST who hates me because I handed her a 15-page backstory, just because I like to write. Now, you can use session 0 to align your backstories with other players. You could write it on your own, and you could just, leave some things blank and fill them out as you play. It's all good. So, however, I want to focus more on your initial goals. You've got 2 options. So this is where experience comes into play. This is Coyote and Crow's version of it. You've got long-term goals and short-term goals, and they're kind of self-explanatory. Short-term goals are what you can accomplish over the course of a few sessions, essentially. I want to find this guy. I want to... Whereas, okay, your long-term goal might be cleanse the city of crime. Your short-term goal might be, I want to track down the man who killed my Uncle Ben. And when you accomplish a short-term goal, you get to buy a new rank and a skill. And it's up to you and your story guide to come together and decide when you accomplish those things. But when you accomplish a long-term goal, these are the things that take an entire story to get right. These are the things that take a long time. These are lofty, lofty goals. So when you finish your long-term goal, you get a couple of options. You can get a new gift, you can lose a burden, you can gain a stat point, you can gain an ability. This is one of the few ways you can gain a new ability, a new power. Short-term goals can't be that quick, Lando, but good for you on thinking.
Maybe
You're using your brain and like that.
Stay hydrated and stick to that routine for that 21 days until it becomes a
Yes,
habit.
that would absolutely be a short-term goal.
Yeah.
And in that case, you could up athletics, you could up, something appropriate. But long-term goals, and you're not tied into them, not really. So long as they are not a core piece of your character's ideology, you can definitely change them. You can change them at any time. You're not penalized for it. The only penalty is that, personally, I think it's easier to finish short-term goals than to change them. But maybe you decide like, oh, I'm going to cleanse the city of crime. Actually, wait, that doesn't matter to me much anymore. I'm actually going to go and better relationships between Cahokia and the Tiswak Alliance. And that's how I'm going to help this city and prove my name. That's how I'm going to validate myself and prove to Raccoon that I am a whisperer worthy of recognition. That's a good reason to change a long-term goal.
Heck yeah.
Or a good in-character reason. Out of character, I never like people playing something they're not having fun with, so whatever, we'll make it work.
It's still a game. You're still there to have
Exactly.
fun. So
Exactly. At the end of the day, no matter what, this is all a game. Now, what we come down to at this point is the name. And the name is either really hard or really easy. And for me, it can be either depending on the character in question or the NPC. But Coyote and Crow makes it a little bit easier. Lando, if you can go ahead and throw that link on page 207 into the chat for me. Because,
207.
yes, because Coyote and Crow has included a Chahi name generator, and Chahi is the trade language that came about within the world of Coyote and Crow as the general common language from native tribes being left alone. So if you aren't attached to a particular name, you can just generate one in the generator. Simple, quick, and easy, and done. If you're indigenous, you can absolutely use a name that follows the naming conventions from your tribe. I do it all the time. One of my favorite NPCs is named Akichiwe, and that means storyteller in Apsalaga. And he, well, you'll see a lot more of him if you see me running around places and telling stories. But
I think I'm gonna go personally with name generator with Makati. I think that is a great name for this character. This Whisper Path of the Raccoon. She's on a quest to make sure that redeeming herself and getting that sweet, sweet validation with her dear smile. Um, her goals would be TBD. Because those are my personal hard parts. Are name, which I'm so glad that there is a character generator for at least like the system. That's always super duper difficult. And then goals, because that can inform a lot about your role play, and maybe even like going into like your burdens more about how do your goals relate to your gifts and your burdens, etc., etc. So a lot to think about, a lot of character creation indeed.
So as far as pronunciation, that's part of why they developed Chahi individually. That way, you don't need to know how to pronounce native words. You're not being disrespectful because it's a made-up language. I mean, all languages are made up, but it's more made up than most languages. You're not going to offend anyone if you pronounce, because I see it and I want to say Witatsu, which is closer to how you might pronounce it in Apsalaga, and I'm still getting that wrong. But it's just as valid to call it Waitatsu or what have you. So with Chahi, you're free to mispronounce it. You're free to say it however you please. You're not going to offend anyone because although there are rules to it, it's a game language. And I'm sure if Coyote and Crow lasts for several decades, there will be a dictionary of Chahi words, and you will have your hardcore gatekeepers who want to sit here and no, it sounds like this. It sounds like this. You know, your Star Trek Klingon had the same thing where they've got people who are really passionate about it and insist that gach cannot be pronounced gak. And we haven't reached that level yet. Give us some time.
Yes, it's pronounced Makati, not Makati.
Mhm.
But
And
either way is valid.
with some languages, pitch accent languages, Crow Apsalaga is a pitch accent language. So where you put that changes the word, and it can get pretty embarrassing. Ila, actually, I'm not gonna go too far into this, but there is a word where one pronunciation means escape and one refers to the male genitals. So that can be a little awkward.
Yes, yes, indeed.
But
So before,
with that, I believe we have come to the end of character creation and thus the end of our first episode.
wowza. Well, thank you so much for your expertise, Logan, and literally everything about this was beautiful, amazing. Shout out to the editing of this book for just the clickable pages and whatever.
Seriously, that is
Making it easy to follow along both in this stream and this show, but also just whenever you are playing and you're doing it on your own. But before we head out, where can people find you, Logan, and learn more about you and about the things that you do, all that nature?
So I have my own website, loganboese.com, loganboese.com. If anyone wants to look at some of the things I'm done, some of the things I'm doing, or wants to find a reason to give me money, by all means. I can also be found at loganboese on Insta and Akichiwe at Twitter. And if you can find me on Twitter just from me saying it, I will give you a prize, which is almost assuredly just going to be a hearty congratulations, but you never know.
That is true. I did have to ask personally for the spelling. But thank you so much. And also thank you to Play Nerd Allies and Coyote and Crow and Hero Forge for letting us do this show and be able to do so. So definitely check all of them out. And I am your co-host and your lovely What the Heck is Going On gal, Jade Valkyrie. You can find me most places at Jade Valkyrie. And I have a website as well, jadevalkyrie.com. And yeah, we will be around. We'll be around in 2 weeks, I believe. Same time, same place. I believe Logan will be somewhere else.
I will be at Gen Con.
Yes. Actually, no, it's not 2 weeks. It'll be next week. Forgive me on that one.
You can track me down at Gen Con. I'm running a couple of Coyote and Crow games there. I will also be just sort of wandering around the con, and I look forward to seeing any of you. Don't hesitate to come up and say hi. If I think you're a weirdo, that just means we're kin. And I'm going to close this out by saying goodbye in the Apsalaga language. It's Chinook Theodawik.
Oh, we do have a dice giveaway real quick, so hold on to your hats.
And we're going to go rating, so by all means stick around. Let's see who won this set of dice from the ever wonderful Phoenix Dice.
Oh, congratulations, Rebel Foreskin. You have won your dice. Congratulations.
And separate congratulations for having named that I did not realize what it was going to be until I tried to say it out loud.
I've been saying it like in my head a lot, and it's just been so it's given me like a little bit of a giggle every single time, every single chat. So I'm loving that now I get to say it on the show.
And where can Rumple Foreskin contact to get these lovely set of Phoenix Dice? Excellent. Go ahead and send a whisper either directly to P&A to collect that, or if you're on the Play Nerd Allies Discord, go ahead and shoot Kyle himself a Discord message, letting him know that you run those dice. And congratulations again. And I believe with that, it is time for us to go on our customary raid.
Yes, we'll be reading Sensei. Oh my goodness, my pronunciation today. Sensei Suplex. We have 18 in the raid so far. Make sure that you join and you stick around for more. I believe that they're probably doing some D&D content. But yeah, stick around for more of that tabletop. And it was so lovely to have y'all here and see you next week.